It's Tuesday, the 31st, and it's the very last day. This is the beginning of a new year. Like, this is the first set of episodes for the new year. Even though today's the 31st, you should just ignore that. Happy New Year.
This was supposed to be live.
Krista is out sick. So, the live one, we're going to do a yearly recap. I think this is going to be awesome. We're going to do like some kind of a story recap. There's a thread for that on the forum. You can also maybe comment below. We might see that. We probably will. I don't know. Engagement algorithm, whatever. That's probably going to be Thursday if Krista's feeling better. We're going to do that when Krista's feeling better. Maybe New Year's Day. Maybe Thursday. Maybe next week. Whenever Krista's feeling better. Live 2024 recap based on the most WTF or whatever stories. I'm wearing a Be Quiet sweater because I forgot and wore a green shirt today. And I didn't want to be a floating head.
So we do have a little bit for the end of the year, the scraps of the year. Notice that the business news was nearly non-existent this week.
Yeah.
Why would anybody be introducing anything this week? It makes no sense.
I noticed my stress levels were also a lot lower because there wasn't anybody harassing me because everybody was on vacation for the whole week. So that was nice.
But there were some stress levels that probably spiked when this was announced.
Microsoft bundling practices are the focus of a federal antitrust probe. I really wanted to go dig this up, but the first time we ever talked about Microsoft antitrust probe, like 6 years ago, we said, well, if they want to be effective, they should look at bundling because it's crazy how the client access licenses bundled with Office, bundled with cloud services, changes the pricing dramatically. It's literally cheaper to buy things in Microsoft stuff in the cloud than it is to have it on your own physical computers on site where you're shouldering some of the costs. That's weird, isn't it? That's super weird.
Now, this is older stuff, but it's interesting that now we see Microsoft is bundling in a way that it's not really optional. They're just going to bundle it for you.
Yeah.
Co-pilot into everything. So, not a good look when you're all of a sudden being probed.
Was this the article that had the specific example of it was an international customer and they had some EU licenses and some US licenses and they said literally we do not want Copilot and they're just jacking up the price and then throwing in Copilot for free and this price is the same as the European price where it's no Copilot. Like that's weird, isn't it?
That's a specific story that we have later, but the feds haven't gotten around to that yet. It's too new. It takes them a long time to do this stuff. And here's a story that you might imagine, hey, you forgot, guys, this was a repeat. But no, it's just more of the same.
U.S. targets China with probe into its semiconductor industry. Although they really buried the lead here. The lead was that ASML, the people that make the machines that everybody uses, think that China's probably only about 3 years behind, not 10 or 20.
They do keep releasing surprising new things that everybody says they shouldn't be able to get. Microsoft and China are not the only ones in the crosshairs of the government. We know about Google, and they've been accused of being a monopoly. They've had some time to chew on that and retort.
Google's counteroffer to the government trying to break it up is unbundling Android apps. This is the meme. You know the meme where it's just like I offer and then you offer? Like, is this...
So really doesn't... They kind of twisted some words here. It's like, well, they're worried about monopoly. Here's why that addresses that. But it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't address it at all. I mean, when you counteroffer that's way in your favor, right? Maybe we keep moving toward the middle. I think this is just a long shot.
I do know it. In my fantasy wishlist land, I would love to see the Android team unshackled from anything so that the Android team's goal becomes building a robust and secure mobile operating system that is completely divorced of specific applications. Think what you know how Bezos accidentally built AWS by telling all of his business divisions of Amazon that they could only communicate with one another through an API. Imagine how amazing Android would be if Android had to be that robust for applications where it's like, no, these divisions can't collude and do shady things. It's like, you have to communicate this way. We'd have sandboxed applications and virtual machines and it would be a utopia.
Yeah, but if the ad part of Google wasn't directing everything else, they wouldn't be Google.
Yeah.
At least they wouldn't have as much money as Google does.
There would be a net benefit for humanity in that scenario.
They're not concerned about that. And as we are entering into regime change here in the United States, we're getting new leadership, and the old leadership is going out. And as a time-honored tradition, you pardon everybody and you dump cash on your corporate friends.
The FCC, quote-unquote, rip and replace provision for Chinese tech tops cyber provisions in the defense bill. We've reported on this before. This is actually not new. This is just a revision of the old stuff. Remember our coverage of Dahua and Hikvision? Some of you out there are contractors and you work on courthouses and federal buildings and state buildings. And it's like, oh, look at that. They're deploying Hikvision camera systems. Guess what's on the naughty list? They've added more stuff to the naughty list. And so if you already have the equipment, you can replace it. There used to be a provision in that if you had the equipment installed, and that was after this thing passed, which has been like 5 or 6 years now, you couldn't go back and then get more money too. Like, you put in something that's on the naughty list when the naughty list exists, that's on you. You made that mistake. You're going to have to pay for it. But if you had something that was added to the naughty list, then you can get money for it.
And here's an interesting one that we talked about a while back. There were all of these apps that were made like for criminals. Hey, you want to do some crime? I've got an app for you, which sounds a little suspicious, right? And it was suspicious. It turns out it was always federal agents the entire time. Now the case is rolling out, and the defendants want to know who made that software.
Government to name the quote-unquote key witness who provided the FBI with backdoored encrypted chat app Anom. So this is going to be an interesting case to follow. There's a lot of other interesting information in the 404 article. You should check it out.
So that's interesting because you've got a lot of really powerful criminal organizations who got burned really bad by this one guy. And now we're going to find out who that person is.
It was tens of millions of messages. Like, they had that, it was fully compromised, and the FBI has copies of everything. So I have a feeling too that, if you were in any way connected to anybody using this, your dealer may have used this. You could be rolled up in this. You could be caught up in this. You're going to be in this database forever.
Now, as I was putting together the year in review stuff, I believe this was February or March when we found out about this. GM, right?
Yeah.
It was early in the year. So, of course, in December, the government figures it out.
The Verge's headline is that senators have ripped into automakers for selling customer data and blocking the right to repair. I love the quote. The quote is amazing. It is clear that the motivation behind automotive companies' avoidance of complying with right to repair laws is not due to concern for customer security or privacy, but instead a hypocritical, profit-driven reaction. Yes, that was not apparent to you with the TV commercials. Like, we showed the TV commercials and made fun of them. It's like, your mechanic is going to be able to stalk you. And it's like,
But again, not new information.
Yeah.
We've known that for quite some time. A lot of people have been very vocal about it. But
how are we this ineffective as a society? Like, it is like built-in ineffectiveness. It's meant to everything is designed so your wheels spin in a rage-induced thing of infinite friction. It's like, let's just get in there, cut to the heart of it, and just cut all this out.
Well, ineffectiveness is the theme of this story, which continues. And again, we still, how many weeks has it been?
It's been a lot.
4 weeks, right?
No, some of that goes back to October.
We still don't know anything.
Drones continue to buzz over U.S. bases. The military isn't sure why or how to stop them. Also, the word drones is really like super misleading because there are drones. There are our drones investigating the anomalies. There are anomalies. There are, plasma orbs and all sorts of fun things. Those have been sighted all over the world. It's really, is there a new plasma-based life form we didn't know about? Is it non-human intelligence? Is it some sort of new experimental black ops technology? Nobody knows. Although the ham radio operators should really get on this, because I feel like if it was a non-human intelligence that was trying to communicate, the ham radio operators are enough of, in number and complexity and technical prowess that they could make first contact easily.
Well, if you went out of control and you just went insane with your holiday spending, maybe you need a little cash, maybe you're going to ask for your families to give it to you, be careful. Because it turns out that the banking system got terrified by the ease of person-to-person payments by new technology. And they created something to compete with it. And they put almost no effort into it.
CFPB sues America's largest banks for allowing fraud to fester on Zelle. Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo are accused of implementing shoddy safeguards on the electronic payments platform, which have cost Americans. I have a much darker take on this than you, which is surprising. I think this was done intentionally, one, to do regulatory capture, so that the banks would literally create the problem. That's part of it. The second part of it is to drive up fees for overages and things that stem from this. Because, you accidentally, somebody tricked you into following a link that sent you an extra $20 and that caused your bank to overdraft. Well, that's not our problem. We're gonna charge you fees for that anyway.
Actually, my thoughts on this are way darker than that. I believe this is, basically one of many pinpricks that will lead to central bank digital currencies, and then total control of because that's the only way we get out of the debt trap.
Well, that kind of leads into the first part of the trap. Is like this was literally done intentionally to do some type of regulatory capture.
Somebody's got to do something about this. Look, the problem is we can't keep track of who all these people are. They're creating new accounts. We can't control it. Let's just create a system where that is impossible.
If we were to explain this as a cash equivalency, it would be like doing away with paper money and instead saying you should just write the denomination on a piece of notebook paper. It's like, I worked for an hour. I'm supposed to get paid $20. My boss has written $20 on a sheet of paper. Like, I could take that to the bank and say, give me money. It's like, oh, this is impossible. We don't need cash. Cash is terrible. It's like, wait a minute. You've corrupted the idea of what cash was.
And the government is looking to get a little bit more efficient. Now, what we learned from a lot of the some assassination attempts we had earlier in the year and some bigger problems that we've had in the past is that government agencies, they don't like to talk to one another very much.
They don't.
They're very cagey, and they don't like to share any of the glory that they come into. And so now we're going to try to fix that in one specific case.
The bill requiring U.S. agencies to share custom source code with each other becomes law. So even on things that should be private and protected, if the Department of Defense is working on something, they have to share it with the Navy, or they have to share it with the Department of Justice, or whatever.
They looked into it, and it turned out that there was reproduction of effort was crazy across the board. Everybody was kind of getting the same general ideas, doing their own thing, and then one would win out and everybody would adopt it. So we were just throwing away tons of cash.
Yeah, some of this kind of thing 18F was meant to fix, but some of this is also systemic. There are, I'm sad to say, there are pockets of functionality in the government that benefit from confusion and imprecision with the interfaces between systems, and they strongly resist standardization.
Well, when you say benefit, who benefits is the phrase that you must apply to find out where all this horror comes from, right? Who is actually getting the money? And it's not always easy to do. And some people said we should make that easier. And some other people said we're never doing that.
The Wall Street Journal's headline is "New Law Requiring Businesses to Report on Who Owns Them is Put on Hold Again."
Now, it was true that this was going to screw small businesses.
Yes.
Because they had the same burden of reporting as Google. And your accounting department needs to spend the next year doing this. You have to tell us everything about yourself.
There's also an aspect of this that like the CPACs and the privately, like the political action committee companies and things like that, who owns that, where does the money come from, will make some aspects of that easier. But like you say, small business, sometimes it makes a lot of sense sometimes to set up a trust. You have internet trolls that will harass you, and it's like, okay, you can put some assets in a trust, and then it's harder for trolls to do bad things because the trust is harder to trace ownership. But now there's going to be, I'm sure, a very well-maintained and completely secure federal registry of that sort of thing that would never leak onto the internet. And then it's like, It's also bad because, nuisance lawsuits could increase. Like if you have a little bit of wealth, but not a lot of wealth, somebody could sue you and be like, I can see that you own these companies. And it's like, but this is a frivolous lawsuit. This shouldn't even be a thing. Whereas lawyers generally won't touch it if they think you're poor.
Now, could it be possible that some recent events have made people more paranoid than ever about corporate ownership being public information?
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
And like I said, we got a regime change coming up, and there are promises. Now, promises from politicians, you don't bank on it. But there are some promises that certain things are going to get a lot more expensive. and I think a lot of you are not going to like it.
Nvidia and AMD rushed to stockpile graphics cards ahead of the Trump tariff that could raise prices by 40%.
Now that's per country. I think it's 20 at the baseline, right? And then there's some per country carve outs. China's going to be 60 maybe.
Yeah.
So depending on where your hardware comes from, you might see an insane sticker shock.
If only we could immediately roll over that manufacturing to onshore production.
Well, I think that's the idea, right? If you're going to advocate for that kind of thing, immediately is not in the cards. So like, when do you tear the Band-Aid off? I don't want to live through it. Could it be better? Who can say? I guess we'll find out maybe.
All of a sudden, that Core 2 Duo that you've got in the closet is worth $500.
And here's an interesting one. This goes back to the whole, are the Lyft drivers employees or are they not? But here, we're not talking about like workers' rights or anything like that. We're talking about just calculating the income.
Lyft says that San Francisco overcharged them $100 million in taxes. And this goes back to the old, is someone who uses Lyft a customer or an employee?
Lyft says customer. They say our drivers are not employees, they are customers. What does that make the passenger?
Cannon fodder. There's also, you know how I always complain about like Lyft and Uber, there's nothing stopping precocious teenagers from doing an app. There's an Indian entrepreneurial team, like 8 or 10 people. They have produced an application that is on GitHub. It's fully open source, and you can roll it out in places other than India. But they're doing ride sharing in India. They've done over 1 million rides, and 100% of the money goes to the driver.
That'll never work. It's the regulatory capture.
Well, here, maybe, but the application has already made it through 1 million rides. So if it comes here, like, it's a thing that could come here. Like, it's a competing thing. And that should also just completely destroy Uber and Lyft's margins.
Well, if you're looking forward to living in your pod and owning nothing, perhaps here is a preview of what your life will be like. You will be rewarded for getting more money into the system, no matter what your crimes.
This is my way out, quote unquote. In Maine, remote work gives prisoners a lifeline. First, this is written by somebody that is rage baiting. But when you think about prisoners doing like paint and furniture production and metalworking,
But this is not. This is tech work.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, we don't pay them for doing those other things. But we do pay them for this.
Well, probably not for long. This is probably an experiment.
But you also have to think about the security risks, right?
I don't know. I mean,
how would you, let's say we're working on a project, how would you gate off dangerous things from criminals who have access to the source code?
You sneak a back door in kind of thing.
That's not the right answer. And maybe the biggest story of the Christmas week, other than, Christmas, was Mr. Musk and him kind of turning against the spirit of the new regime, but then getting supported by the golden god himself. Right-wing
warfare pits big tech against the MAGA over H-1B visas. Like H-1B visa in general is a good thing because you can bring talented people over, and America has famously messed up some amazing people that wanted to live here. Morris Chang, who is the guy that founded TSMC, wanted to do it in America, and America was too stupid to deal with the immigration part of that. But then if you crunch the numbers on how H-1B is actually used, it's unsettling, and it's also upsetting in a lot of ways, in that the people that really are in the 0.1% are not being paid well under the H-1B program. And there are a lot of people in the H-1B program that are being underpaid for their American counterparts.
And it's easy to negotiate with them because they're from the weakest negotiating point that you can be.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how badly you treat me, it's better than what I have now.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So on the Elon side, Elon is, I want H-1B because I can just hire somebody and bring them over and it's not a big deal. But they're also going to be cheaper. He doesn't say that part. But if you look at Tesla's H-1B, doesn't look good for the home team. But also it turns out that there's only like 2 or 3 companies that are the vast majority of H-1B. So there seems to be this H-1B mill which seems like it's some kind of corruption. And then on the other side, for the MAGA people, they say, well, no, this is taking jobs away from Americans. And it's like, that's probably true to an extent, but I don't know if there are enough Americans that have the capacity to learn some of these things.
Well, that's silly.
Well,
it's capacity. I mean, a lot of people have the capacity. Maybe not the motivation.
Then the question becomes, does the motivation come down purely to salary? Like, you're not going to do the H-1B job because the salary is too low. You could do something else.
No, again, you're not just negotiating with salary. You're negotiating with salary and running water.
Well, I was thinking, like, from the American position, it's like an American is not going to want to do. You've listed this job that normally makes $120K for $80K, and yes, an American doesn't want to do that job because it's well below what they can earn somewhere else. Meanwhile, an H-1B is like, yes, I will do that, and then something bad has happened in that scenario.
But if the workforce is so robust over there, why is he here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, like, something has gone wrong in that. It's like, if you come over here, like, there has to be something to bring that up to parity. It's like, you're going to bring somebody over here, and they should be in a position where they can negotiate for the same salary, I guess is what I'm saying, or to have the same rights, or to have the same whatever.
Well, it looks like how it's going to play out is he's going to get his way.
The bad sort of version of that, which is people can come over that are willing to do a job for less.
Yeah, and certain companies are going to get special treatment. One of them being, or multiples of them being, Elon Musk's companies.
So does that not solve that? That doesn't really solve the problem for farmers either, because
I would say zero problems are solved.
Yeah.
Unless you're an Indian worker, and then a lot of job problems are solved.
Or you need somebody that should be earning, $150K a year that is actually only earning 70 or 80. There was a couple reports that those H-1B mills actually take like 20 or 25% or 30% of your salary, which is incredibly egregious. Maybe we should make that federally illegal. Start there.
Also remember that this man earned billions last year.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that has something to do with why he's not able to pay his workers correctly. Maybe too much is being siphoned off the top. Now, one of the themes of 2024 certainly has to be the age of our leadership. And we're going into 2025 with another ancient man in charge. Here's a story that perfectly illustrates how bad things are.
The headline is, "Who is Kay Granger? Congresswoman missing for 6 months, found living at a dementia care home." So this is really weird. So she really was found living in a dementia care home. She didn't run for re-election, but she didn't really announce, hey, the reason I'm not running for re-election is because I'm going into a dementia care home or my health is heading downhill really super fast.
She might not know.
But she was still involved with things on Capitol Hill.
But she wasn't voting.
Yeah.
At all. She wasn't really doing her job.
Yeah. She didn't run for re-election, but she didn't resign. So it's kind of like...
And no one announced that.
Yeah.
Citizens figured it out because they saw the voting records and they're like, wait a minute, our district is not voting for anything. What's going on here? Oh, right. She doesn't know where she is.
Seems like there's provisions for that in the law. Like, oh, this is a thing that happens.
Oh, yeah. We got, what they keep talking about with the presidency, right?
Yeah.
You can call the no confidence vote.
Or you can just say, hey, I can't do my job because something happened and I died or whatever. And there's like, that's not a new thing.
How many times do you think that she's there in the home and, the people working there don't know who she is. And she's like, do you know that I'm a congresswoman? All right, sweetie. Yeah. Here's your pudding. Moving over to the EU, they are also looking to pry open these walled gardens as usual.
The headline is, the EU wants Apple to open AirDrop and AirPlay to Android and other platforms. This was kind of an offshoot of the story that we did last week where I was talking about like turn your phone into just a thing to run programs. The EU more specifically is saying, hey, let's just starting with basic stuff like AirDrop. Why doesn't AirDrop work cross-platform? And everybody on the Android side as well. Let me just tell you how bad Apple is. And so the EU is saying, okay, this should start there. But this is really just one little subcomponent of that whole umbrella of the EU wants you to be able to run arbitrary software on your Apple devices.
And if there is a Trojan horse, perhaps, to erode the last bit of consumer rights when it comes to copyright, I believe that it will be shaped like a soccer ball, because that's what these European countries use to illustrate like why we need total top-down control of everything. And Italy is pushing the thing forward.
Cloudflare must block quote-unquote piracy shield domains and IP addresses across its service. Why? Because it was fairly easy to get streamed soccer matches that didn't cost $100 per match.
Now they're saying they don't just want to be able to, like DMCA, where they have an automated system. They want to just bypass anybody else. They want to directly do it without any kind of court order, without any control, and they want it at the DNS level. Which, if that sounds insane to you, it's because it is. Yeah. Because ignore the possibility for abuse. Let's just look at the abuse of DMCA.
As I was reading this, I was thinking, is like there might be one group on planet Earth that could help the rights holders with this, and that is the group that was responsible for those pagers the terrorists had. It's like, oh yeah, from now on, every device on which you can consume content has to have one of those kind of batteries in it that we can. It's like, oh, your key has been matched 3 times to copyrighted material. Boop.
That's like one step away from, we're just going to install this explosive in your neck. Don't steal.
That is going to happen in our lifetime. I'm very afraid of that happening in our lifetime.
And if also the European Union has decided that there is one connector to rule them all.
USB-C charging mandate has finally arrived in the European Union. Here is what that means. This is just a feel-good story about we should have done this a long time ago.
So this is phones and tablets, not all other devices, interestingly. I think laptops are like in a weird quasi-category, but this doesn't mean that everything goes USB-C, which is interesting.
I have to admit, after a year of using the Framework laptop with the 240-watt USB-C charging brick, 240 watts in a USB-C form factor can get a little sketchy. Not that there's anything wrong with the Framework laptop. It's just that 240 watts in a USB-C connector, that is a marvel of modern engineering.
Well, there is one connector that has shown a lot of problems this year, over and over, and that is the undersea cable. And most recently, we had 2 very suspiciously cut in a certain amount of time. Some people looked into the records, and they were like, there was maybe 1 ship that could be involved here. But that ship has said, we don't want to be we're not going to participate in your investigation.
The Guardian's headline says, Sweden says that China denied its request for prosecutors to board ship linked to severed cables. Foreign Minister says China denied the request for the prosecutor to investigate on board the Yiping 3, which had sailed over the cables. Now, this has nothing to do with the other ship that Finland surrounded and boarded and found lots of interesting equipment. So that is, they're actually calling for an invocation of one of the NATO articles over that. And so it's like, hey, why didn't Sweden do this in the past? We have this article where they're like, well, we tried to, and they didn't want to let us. And so we just didn't want an international incident, so we didn't do it. Meanwhile, I think it was Finland, right? Finland was like, F this, we're going to do this.
Interesting, and I think it might have been the other one. That boat has just left. Like, we're done with the investigation. They've been there for 2 months, I think.
Yeah.
But they did make a good argument. It was like, these sailors have been on board the ship for 2 months doing nothing. We have to take them home. Although you could put them on smaller ships, right? Move them out of there.
Some of those are also marked like no captain, and they're just at anchor, and it's just a floating thing somewhere that there's no one on board or skeleton crew on board. But yeah, it doesn't. The stuff that they found on the NATO one is Archduke Ferdinand the undersea cables equivalent. I don't know.
Well, TikTok is a fireball when it comes to politics, and now we've seen that our leaders have turned around. Now they love it. Some of them, at least. But in most places,
those people voted for me.
In most places, it has spread more information that is anti-leadership, current leadership, and they have one way of dealing with it.
Albania to close TikTok for a year, blaming it for promoting violence among children.
Now, this was based on a specific case where some kids attacked each other, and it was supposedly about an online beef. But TikTok is saying, we've done an internal investigation, and we can't find that any of these kids have TikTok accounts. So somebody's lying.
Spooky.
And Russia, interestingly, seems to be dodging sanctions with cryptocurrency. But that's for the government, not for the citizens.
Russia bans crypto mining in multiple regions, citing energy concerns. It's like a 6-year deal.
Now, they do have some energy infrastructure problems.
Yeah.
One of those being missiles. So
that whole region's got some problems like that. It's not good.
I can understand why they might want to ration a little bit, I suppose. And this is interesting because we have another story. It seems like it's the year of the MC, not Hammer.
South Korea mulls creating a KSMC, Korea Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, a contract chip maker to compete with TSMC, and requires a $13.9 billion investment. Now, South Korean officials kind of avoided talking about Samsung, but this is really, I see it as like Samsung is going to be involved. And, it starts out talking, it's like, although Samsung is, in South Korea, blah, blah, blah. No, this is 100%. Like Samsung is falling a little behind, and South Korea needs help. They need to hang on to that industry. That would be a wise move because we're going to need advanced chips from now until the end of time.
Now, the Korean government will be putting up some part of that money, and then industry will be putting in the other part. But the government will have a much higher input than one we'll talk about in the business section, which is the Japanese advanced semiconductor manufacturing. Everybody's getting semiconductor manufacturing. And we have some new online laws that are probably a portent of our future.
Critics decry Vietnam's draconian new internet law. And this is really, you read this, and this is more like the soccer match thing. It's like we need to be able to control all things at all times, and we must disappear things from the internet like as if they never existed. It's like,
and you must confirm your identity to post anything on social media. That's the real power play here. And anything that goes afoul of this one secretive government agency has to be removed immediately, and you have to rat out everybody who was involved. So basically, this is chilling free speech I don't even know if they have free speech, but it's chilling to whatever you're going to do online because you got to be real careful.
They hated him because he told the truth. They're going to be able to track you down. You can't just post a thing and be like, hey, yeah, we should investigate that. That's correct. It's like, no.
And El Salvador, they were mocked for investing heavily in Bitcoin. That was when Bitcoin was around $60,000. So they have nearly doubled their money, and it seems like it was a big success, but the International Monetary Fund really doesn't like it. Like really, really doesn't like it.
World's first Bitcoin nation scales back its crypto dream. Basically, if they want loans from the IMF, they need to diversify their investments. And yeah, their investment in crypto has been fine, but that's too much exposure for the International Monetary Fund. They want to fund things like war and suffering and disease and petulance and locusts and things. And they're much more comfortable funding that than cryptocurrency.
So they're getting a $1.4 billion loan, and the only reason they're getting that is that they've agreed not to be so Bitcoin friendly. And they've also agreed that it will no longer be legal tender status in the country.
Yeah, I don't know that it really ever got off the ground to be legal tender status, but
well, I mean, it was legal tender, but if they don't take the payment at the store, then it's kind of a weird thing.
Too slow and too costly to do those transactions, so they didn't really give them much of anything up there.
Not much social this week, but we've heard this little soundbite before. But this seems to be something that Mark Zuckerberg is really intent on because he keeps repeating it. It's kind of like the metaverse thing, just keeps saying it over and over. And it sounds pretty Orwellian, doesn't it?
Yeah. Meta expects AI characters to generate and share social media content. Now, I read this article, and this is based on what Meta has said in interviews, but I think they got it a little bit wrong. I think my takeaway, I got something out of this that the Meta people were trying to communicate that I think the article author missed. And that is, what was your takeaway on the AI agents doing this?
That they just want churn. They want constant content to interact with you. And he even made quotes about it'll be more enjoyable interactions. So
I think what Meta was saying that they're going to do, and this could be my imagination running wild, is not that it's going to be AI, like an AI generated fantasy story thing. I think that Meta has in mind for this agent to be running on your phone all the time. The cameras are on all the time, all the cameras front and back. And the AI agent is looking at literally anything in your life that is remotely interesting, and it is building a catalog of that. And so when they're talking about sharing AI generated content, they're not talking about like fully fictitious content or building their own echo chamber for you. They're talking about building like a little AI thing that just sits on your shoulder. And it's like, wow, did you see that amazing thing? Let's have an instant replay. And it just does it.
There was a quote somewhere in here about, here we go. We've been creating AIs that have more personality options and interest and are a bit more fun to interact with. So by your theory, he's basically saying, you people are boring.
Yeah.
I want to take your life and I want an AI to make it interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want it to post in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so like, imagine you're in line at the store and, somebody walks by and they're, and it's just like the AI notices you noticing something is amiss. And then it's like, what is amiss with the thing that the human being currently sees? And then on social media, you can just post and be like, look at this. This is going straight to peopleofwalmart.com. Imagine if that was a one click. And Meta is at the center of that in terms of content generation. That's where they're headed. It's going to be an AI agent that just looks at any little thing that is like that and then generates a whole thing for it. And then it's just a meme factory on your shoulder.
How depressing for you if you're never getting prompted because your life is just so boring. Well, there are some interesting things on Facebook, no doubt about that. There's a lot of it, but you might not see a whole lot of that because it's horrific. It's the worst stuff that you can imagine. And you might think that AI is stepping in and squashing all that, but no, it's being done manually, and it seems to have terrible, terrible impacts.
More than 140 Kenya Facebook moderators diagnosed with severe PTSD. Yeah, it is like that.
So these guys are basically locked in a shipping container, and they just look at horror after horror after horror to decide, should this be censored or should it not? And apparently that's really bad for you in the long run. Who could have guessed? And the augmented reality VR seems to have failed. Augmented reality is the new king. We're going to make that happen. And so Meta has now shifted into that.
Meta to add display to Ray-Bans as race over smart glasses intensifies. So you'll be able to see, and the ones that have the built-in camera, it doesn't just have the built-in camera. It's like, hey, Meta, what am I looking at here? It's like, here's what you're looking at. Or it's, version 0.1 of that aforementioned AI that sits on your shoulder doing stuff.
Oh, I hate USA Today. And finally, we have, was this the flip-flop of 2024? Yeah. I don't know. I think we had more worse ones. But here we are. After all this time, the sides have changed.
Can Trump save TikTok? The Art of the Deal host president thingy wants to try. We just need the algorithm to be a little less aggressive. That's all.
So he's saying, hey, all that stuff about banning TikTok, don't worry about it. Don't worry about any of this. I'll deal with it personally. I'm going to negotiate a deal with TikTok. Just go away and I'll deal with it. It's basically his plan.
Which is probably just a delay tactic.
But he wanted the Supreme Court to pause the ban so we'd have time to do that. I think they declined that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we might get our TikTok ban after all.
What do we got lined up for tomorrow?
Business and security. That was a huge security week, actually.
Yeah.
I guess everybody wanted to put out the bad security stories when nobody was paying attention. Right?
There was a lot of stories on December 26th, and it's like, why would you wait to do this story until December 26th? Oh, right. Yeah. Fabulous.
And that'll be New Year's Day, so you can watch it while you're hungover and regretting your decisions.
They're not going to remember that. Engagement challenge, just match the keyboard with your palm in the comments section below.
Tell us what your poison of choice was last night or tonight for this day.
Oh, yeah, and keep an eye out for the live stream that might be today or tomorrow, later in the day.
All right.
All right. Bye.